18 years after the initial release of Persona 3, we are finally getting a remake of the very beloved JRPG in Persona 3 Reload. Persona 3 is the game that I always say I want to be my favorite story out of the Persona series. The story's theme clutches onto this idea of memento mori, which means in Latin, remember you must die. And almost every single character moment in the game is about characters and dealing with this idea. If you compare the other Persona game stories to each other though, the problem is that this is all Persona 3 really has over the others. A few small improvements, however, I think could make it the best story in the Persona series. In case it wasn't clear based on the things I said previously, we will be going over spoilers and story moments in Persona 3, Persona 3 Portable, and Persona 3 FES. That all being said, let's get into how these small improvements could make Persona 3 Reload the best Persona story. Before we get into it, I just wanted to say I would greatly appreciate it if you would share this video with your friends or anyone who likes Persona 3. I'm really trying to grow this channel with a lot of my interests, and Persona happens to be one of them. So yeah, please share with your friends, do whatever else you're supposed to do on YouTube to promote videos, subscribe, and yeah, without further ado, let's get into the video. I will come out and say it right away. I think Persona 3 Reload will be the best Persona game. Based on what we have seen already from the trailers, a lot of the critiques I have of the original story may actually already be fixed. Regardless, I wanted to talk about this because I do think that it's worth mentioning about the original Persona 3 and how it can be improved. So let's just get into our first topic of today, Shinjiro Aragaki. I'm sure this will sound weird to say, since this is my first critique of the original Persona 3, but Shinjiro is actually my favorite Persona 3 character, maybe even my favorite Persona character of all time. He's really a character that you don't really see too much anymore in current day media, the mysterious, brooding, but sweet side character that you would commonly see in the early 2000s and late 90s and movies and stuff like that. Shinjiro has a lot of strengths as a part of the plot, but as a character himself, I find him to be a little lacking, unfortunately. I really wish we got to spend more time with the character, or even in the amount of time that we spend with him if we could just see him more and interact with him more. Which again, Persona 3 Reload seems to have changed that with the new cooking and gardening social event gameplay. Even as someone like myself who highly regards the character and enjoys him a lot, I found it very hard to connect with his death because of the fact that you just really don't get to spend a lot of whole time with him. I really appreciated him as a character and what he did for the story, but I couldn't really connect with that moment like I think we were supposed to. It really seems that when designing Shinjiro, they put a lot of work into his design and his persona's design. Shinjiro always wears a long sleeve coat and a beanie because he's so cold from the persona suppressants that he has to take. They're having these great side effects on him. We actually also see them double down on this in Persona 3 Reload, as during his Third attack, he actually winces in pain before he summons his persona. Also, on the topic of his persona, we would have to mention how the name Castor is in reference to Castor and Polydeuces, the story of the Gemini constellation in Greek mythology. I would recommend looking up this story on your own if you wanted to know more about it, but the gist of it is that Castor and Polydeuces are seeking revenge on some other people who stole their cattle, so they went ahead and tried to steal theirs, but in doing so, one of them stabbed Castor and he was fatally wounded. They have different fathers, so Polydeuces asked his father, Zeus, if he could share some of his immortality with Castor so that he could live, and as a result, they became the Gemini constellation, representing one half immortality and the other half death. There's actually a whole video that could be made about Greek mythology and its influence on the Persona 3 cast. I'm sure when I mentioned the name Polydeuces, you were like, where do I know that from? It's Akihiko's persona. I'm sure with the similarities between Akihiko and Shinjiro and Castor and Polydeuces, I don't need to point out why Akihiko's persona is named what it is. In conclusion, I really think that Shinjiro could benefit getting the same care that was put into the theme and the plot points of the character, and some of the subtle things that they added about him. If they took that care and they put it to his character moments, which again, I fully have faith that that's going to be fixed based on the new scenes that they've shown in some of the trailers. So yeah, let's get on to the next topic.
Tsukaya?
STGA is a group of rogue persona users that use the internet to take out people during the dark hour. Takaya, Jin, and Chidori all were captured while they were kids and experimented on by the Kirijo group, given personas. Out of the 100 kids that were captured, these 3 were the only ones that actually survived. They all understand that their personas are too powerful for them to handle, hence why they have to take the persona suppressants. They are on a tightrope. They're going to die soon. So, they go ahead and live their life as they please, although it really seems like they're living their life as Takaya pleases. Jin had so much hatred for the Kirijo group, but Takaya showed him that you could choose to let go of that hatred and live as you please. And because of that, he grew an immense amount of respect for Takaya and just listens to what he says as a result. But Chidori, on the other hand, we actually see her not quite switch sides, but embrace Junpei and do and say things that are uncharacteristic of the life she's been living with Takaya and Jin. Overall, I think there are a lot of strengths of STGA in the original Persona 3. The voice acting jobs are pretty good in that group, especially Takaya is a standout there. The designs of all the characters are amazing looking, especially with their upgrades in Persona 3 Reload. I didn't love Jin in the original Persona 3, but he looks very cool in Persona 3 Reload. But the biggest strength, I think, for them is the reveal that the Kirijo group has victims and that they are living and suffering from what they have done. We have learned about the Kirijo group kind of through the lens of Mitsuru and her family, so giving this darker side from a different party that had different experiences with the group is very interesting and a great addition to the story. However, our antagonist group does have their own fair share of problems. One, I think they're a bit of a victim to the pacing of the story. The 12 Shadows goes by kind of slow, and then it kind of feels like once you're done with that, you're like, okay, we're getting into the second act, but it's the final act of the story and it all finishes up very quickly comparatively to the rest of the game. And I think because of this, they kind of share a similar problem that I mentioned with Shinjiro, in that you don't really get to spend enough time with them. They're kind of like Team Rocket in that way, where they just show up as comedic relief to be gone later, but as we know, STGA is not a comedic relief group. I just want to see them more, and I want them to have more varied interactions. I feel like most of the time when you see them talking about the same stuff over and over again, and I just want to see them be put in more situations so we can see how they would react or what they think. I'll finish up STGA with this point because I don't necessarily think it's a bad direction. It's just something that I wanted to cover as maybe a personal preference of mine. STGA embracing death and wanting the coming of Nyx and starting this whole cult, I think was an interesting direction for them, but personally it feels a little weird because Nyx was the plan to be carried out by Ikutsuki, one of the employees of the Kirijo group, who presumably had a hand in torturing these kids. So I don't understand why this group of people would align their interests with Ikutsuki, but again, I don't hate what they ended up doing, but it just kind of irks me a little bit. Now that we've gone over Shinjiro and wrapped up with STGA, let's get into the final point that I want changed in Persona 3 Reload.
The enemy!
I think it comes as a surprise to absolutely no one when I say that Shuji Ikutsuki is the thing that needs to change the most from Persona 3 to Persona 3 Reload. I think it's pretty safe to say that Ikutsuki has been completely neglected by the story when he could have been something really amazing. Throughout the game, we point back to the past of the Kirijo group and say how heinous and ugly it was, but we don't have a representative of that time period. Ikutsuki could have been the perfect representative of that time period. In fact, that is exactly what they are trying to go for. We have the new Kirijo group represented by Mitsuru's dad, and the old Kirijo group represented by Ikutsuki. They even have an amazing moment in Tartarus of them versus each other that doesn't even feel fulfilling to the end of the Kirijo group story because 1, Ikutsuki is just a character you don't care about, and 2, this battle that ends in the tragic death of both of these characters just is completely disregarded by the main cast as they move on super quickly. Even if you look at Ikutsuki in the beginning of the story before the twist is revealed, he really doesn't even provide much. He's just the character that tells you information that no other character would have any way of knowing. I'm actually super curious the direction they're going to be taking Ikutsuki in Persona 3 Reload, because it seemed they've made some drastic changes already. Based on the trailers, we know that Ikutsuki's voice actor approach is way different than it was in Persona 3. I personally think Persona 3, they took an approach where they wanted Ikutsuki to be this silly, goofy character, so he has a silly, goofy voice. But the problem was, when the twist happened, that voice never changed, so we had this person saying pretty heinous, awful stuff to us with this silly, goofy voice, and it just doesn't work. In the trailers that show Ikutsuki, however, he now has this grittier, grovelier kind of voice, so it's a far different approach, but now I'm kind of weirded out about how the silly, goofy moments are going to play out with this voice, but we haven't seen any of those moments yet, so who knows. I think in making a faithful adaptation, Ikutsuki's place in all this is going to be the hardest thing to adapt faithfully. I will say, however, when I watched these trailers, I was quite surprised that they are taking such a radically different approach with this voice, and it makes me hopeful for the rest of Ikutsuki's character in Persona 3 Reload. In conclusion of all three of the topics, I think Persona 3 would really benefit from being a longer story or just fitting more into the story where you can, because all three of these characters seem to suffer from the same problem, which is a pacing issue that exists in Persona 3. That being said, as I've been saying throughout the video, these trailers that they have been dropping for Persona 3 Reload fill me with nothing but absolute hope, and I do think that this will be the best game in the Persona franchise. I mean, I was absolutely shocked when I saw that we would be getting a STGA side story where we work together with, it showed Takaya, I don't think it showed anyone else, but I was, again, just shocked, so very excited for that. But yeah, so if you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I would really appreciate it if you like, comment, subscribe. Please tell me what you think about these plot points. I think they are honestly pretty safe topics that most people agree on, but I always tell everyone I want Persona 3 to be my favorite Persona game because I feel that it is very strong in a lot of points, but it just needs these few things to be fixed to push it over the edge. But yeah, hey, thanks for watching again, and bye!